Okay, there we go. Ooh, I don't think I have a very good connection, but we we shall give it a go. All right. Well, the color keeps changing and everything. I don't know if you guys see the same thing as I do, but hello and welcome to Soul Aligned Self-Care. This week's topic is some mindset hacks to help those big dreams come true. And I've been talking about this most of the week. So let me just get a few things situated here. Me trying to go live in more than one place. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Oh wait, here it is. Okay. All right. I'm just going to start. I don't want to make you guys wait very long. And hopefully, I've been having trouble with my internet. I don't know if you guys have. Okay, it cleared up a little bit. Hey, what's up, Janet? Hi, how are you? Um, I'm having trouble with my connection today, so hopefully I can get through this. I was contemplating going live on my phone just because for some reason I just have less trouble when I do it on my phone. So, and it's a matter of the shape of the screen. I don't like it when it's on my phone because it's all skinny, and then when I try to put it on YouTube, it looks weird, which is kind of silly, I guess. I shouldn't really care about that. Okay, so like I said, today we're talking about some mindset hacks to help you bring those big dreams true. And I'm going to cover three of them, and I've been talking about them a little bit in the past couple of days, but I wanted to kind of come on live and talk about them on here. Um, the first one is being reasonable versus dreaming big. And then the second one is what are the standards that you hold yourself to that you use as like a guide point or a set point, some people would call it, in your life. And then the last one would be what do you think your limitations are? Your real limitations. What do you think are perceived as real in your mind? And so those are the three things. And this is all, everything that I'm covering right now is all about mindset. Um, and this is what really needs to shift in order for you to I'm calling this the Get Unstuck series. So we're going through this. And this is just one part of it. And in order for you to really start working towards your dreams and creating an extraordinary experience for yourself in your life, if that's what you want for yourself, then you have to get through make some of these mindset shifts in order to move in that direction. I'm not gonna say that you'll remain stuck if you don't make these mindset shifts. But if you really want to have like a wonderful, extraordinary, fun existence in this lifetime, these are some of the things that you need to get past. So I'm going to be reading my notes. So when you see me like looking away, I'm either looking at another camera that I'm trying to work with, or I'm reading my notes. So I'm just going to put this here. Sorry. I'm not terribly smooth when it comes to stuff like this. I'm just going to hold this in my hand. I feel like it's better. It's my notes. I feel like I'm going to hold this in my hand. At some point, I'll be able to pull the notes up next to me and it'll be easier. But I like to keep my notes with me just so I kind of stay on track and I don't babble too much. So, being reasonable versus dreaming big. So, uh, your trouble areas are organization and prior to. Okay, yeah, I could. Wow, I'm really good at those things. I could definitely help you out with some of those things. Um, I think the way I kind of teach those things is about being intentional with your time, prioritizing, like being really intentional with your time and being very um, where to find pockets of time. Like I'm really good at that. I actually have a master class that's called the Time Expansion Master Class, and I teach a few like out of the ordinary tactics on how to create more time and space for yourself. And in doing that, you become more intentional about your time. So it's like a loop. When you're more intentional with your time, you create more, space for yourself and more time, and vice versa. It like feeds off of each other. So that's kind of cool. Um, anyway, when we're starting out, when we're little kids, our parents read our books to us, and a lot of times they're like these fantastic books that have, like if you were a little girl, maybe like a princess book, and and all these different, very imaginative things, and anything is possible. And we're kind of taught to like enjoy this and dream big and think big, and then it gets to a point where we're expected to automatically like, kind of like switch over and become like super serious, like super like, and I wrote in my blog post like things like, when we go to school, it's like, respect authority, pay attention, color inside the lines, be quiet, be good. It's almost like obey, 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 don't do anything creative. And so it's very confusing, I think, when we tell our kids one thing and then at a certain point we expect that to all change and switch over. And then we're told to do these things that are socially acceptable, like go to school, go to college, get a good job, get married, have kids, work your butt off, work, 80% of your lifetime for someone else so that they can flourish and enjoy their life. And then maybe if you're lucky, and for a lot of us in today's day and age, this doesn't happen. Retirement does not happen. This was, I always say that, like my dad's generation, maybe a generation after that. I have some friends that are older than me in their 60s who do have retirements, but very few people. It's not really something that happens so much anymore. And so I say maybe if we're lucky, we get to retire and then enjoy our lives when we're older. And I feel like it's just kind of like ass backwards. It's kind of like I think we should enjoy our lives, and I'm not saying we shouldn't work, but I'm saying we should um, use our time differently. Um, Let me catch up with my notes. So yeah, another point that I made is when we're being like super reasonable and we're following all the rules and coloring inside the lines. I always use that example. We don't usually experience anything like extraordinary. Like if you look at anybody in history that has done anything like absolutely amazing, they were not coloring inside the lines. They were not following the rules. As a matter of fact, it was probably the opposite. And I think Eleanor Roosevelt, I love Eleanor Roosevelt quotes, but I think she said, I'm not positive if this was her, but no well behaved woman ever made history. And I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. And I feel like a lot of the expectations of society and what comes as so called normal is, or is what I look at as safe. And like we tell our kids to go to college and do something that's safe because that's what's going to serve them in this world. And right now that world is crumbling a little bit, so it's not a sure thing if your child goes to college and gets a bachelor's degree in whatever, that they're going to get this fantastic job. It's not really guaranteed anymore. The starting salaries are kind of like the same as they were like in the 70s, and the expenses have quadrupled. So I think it's really hard for kids nowadays, and that's why you're seeing this big shift in mindset. And I believe that it's something that's needed because I don't believe coloring inside the line is going to get anywhere. Anything. It's not going to create anything that's extraordinary or fun. It's not going to be a way that you could um, chase those big dreams. So when you're thinking about your goals and when you're thinking about those dreams, I'm inviting you really to think big and to not not let these outside sources kind of have an effect on you. So when you start to think of something that you really want, and you start to like think, well, if I told anybody about this, they would think I was crazy, and how am I ever going to do this? Like this, and I'll talk about that. That's one of the mindset hacks that I'm going to be discussing today. The limitations that you set on yourself. Um, I'm sorry, let me just turn off these notifications. Okay, so, oh my goodness, I don't know how to do this. Okay, sorry. That's very distracting to me with those notifications. I don't know if you could hear them, but I don't know how to shut them off right now because I'm on Facebook. I'm pretty sure those are Facebook notifications. So I lost my train of thought. I don't know where I am. Oh my goodness, it won't stop. Let me see if I could stop it. Actually, no. Okay, I'm just going to ignore it. Sorry. So, my invitation to you is when you're starting to dream big, I want you to take out of the consideration of what's acceptable to society, what's acceptable to your family, traditions in your family, maybe your significant other or your partner, um, what's acceptable in society, what's considered normal or whatever. I want you to really my goal is to inspire you to go after those big dreams because that's what's needed in this world to create not only just like a really cool experience in your life, but to bring things um, into this lifetime that are needed. Like I believe like a lot of people's dreams are crushed, and a lot of these dreams that these people have inside of them when they're crushed and they're kept down and they're held down are things that the world needs to move forward. And I do believe that this happens with women more than men, and it's just because of um, uh, it's just more acceptable for a man to color outside the lines and be accepted for that, whereas with a woman it's she's crazy, she's hysterical, she's whatever, there's a lot of judgments with that. So I feel like it's just a little bit easier for men to like step out of that and just be like bold and go for things. It's also they're more supported in certain ways. So that's what I would like you, that's the type of mindset that I would like you to have. All right, let me just look at my notes. So, and also if someone's telling you to like be reasonable, that's a sure sign, that you're on the right path. That's that you're going in the right direction. If someone says that's never going to work, maybe you should like tone that down a bit or be more reasonable. Um, and and of course, when you go for these big dreams, you're going to learn lessons. Things are going to happen. You're going to have to like maybe redirect yourself sometimes. But when you think bigger, you move a lot further ahead, more than you can ever have imagined if you just played it safe or started with a safe goal. Like sometimes people start with like a safe goal or a safe dream because they feel like, what if they fail big? What is everybody going to think of me? And like I really don't care what people think of me if I fail, because I'd rather try and fail than to not try at all and just to remain in like this little cocoon, this protective cocoon. That sounds really boring to me. Um, so the question with this is the question to ask yourself first when you come up with a goal or a dream. So say you're going to say you're following this Get Unstuck series, you wrote out your core values and you're starting to think about what dreams that you want to pursue, and you're starting to write out those dreams in the different areas of your life. The first thing I want you to do is to call yourself out when you start limiting yourself because you're afraid to fail or you're afraid it's something that you can't do, or if somebody finds out that I'm pursuing this, they're going to think I'm crazy, they're going to think this of me. And I want you to just be 100% supportive of yourself, and um, kind of think of it as, how would you support your children if they were going for a dream? Like, how much would you support them and push them forward and be like, you could do anything? Do the same thing for yourself. We owe that to ourselves. And then the next thing I want you to ask yourself if you start limiting yourself or making a dream smaller or safer, is why wouldn't you dream big? Like, why wouldn't you dream the biggest dream you could possibly dream? Anything is possible in this world. I believe personally that once you think it, it's there, it's real. It's in the timeline somewhere. You just have to connect to it. If it didn't exist, it wouldn't be in your head. Like it wouldn't be there if it didn't exist. If it wasn't possible, it would not be there. So that's the mindset you need to have. It's the I dreamt it. It's something I thought of. It's possible. Especially if you see other people doing it, then it's like even more possible. These are like things that prove that these things are possible. So why wouldn't you dream big? Why wouldn't you dream crazy? When you do this, you not only leap forward faster and bigger and funner. I know that's not a word, but That's the only thing. That's what popped into my head. It's more fun, but you also learn bigger lessons. You make bigger mistakes. I don't like calling them mistakes. I like calling them lessons because that's what they are. Like you don't get anywhere in life if you don't make mistakes and learn from them, right? And if you're trying to avoid making mistakes, then you're not going to have any fun. You're not going to get anywhere. So it's about making those big mistakes. It's about like, as a matter of fact, I would encourage you to dream big enough so that you fuck everything up all the time and you learn big lessons so that you can move forward, right? So why wouldn't you? You take bigger leaps, you learn bigger lessons, and you have more exciting, bigger outcomes. Right. So that is the first. That's the first mindset hack, and then the second one is what standards are you using as your guide? So what that means is we all have like these set limitations on ourselves and we don't think of them as limitations. This is just what we've learned from looking at the people we grew up with, the parents, our society, and the things around us. It shows us what's possible, and we set these as limitations and guides. And I call them limitations because that's exactly what they are. So what do you might look at your parents and say, okay, my parents worked really hard. They worked really hard. They worked many, many, many hours to create this life for me. Yeah, they were never around when I was a kid, but look what they created for me. Look what they um, moved forward. And when I see this generation after generation, and it does like move the generations ahead of time, but then I look at all the lives that pushed up those future generations that they spent their lives just working themselves to death, sometimes to the point of ill health and stuff like that. And I think it could be so much better than that. Like if we just expanded what we thought our set point was, because the truth is that there's no real set point. Like who sets this point? So, like I said, who sets it? Society, our parents, maybe the people that are mentors, people around us, maybe siblings, sometimes maybe our partners, because they're showing us what's possible as we grow up. And so you could have some people that grow up very poor, something like that, and they have like these lower like set points or guide points that they're working from. Um, but as you can see in society, there are some people that don't let these things limit them and they move forward. And these people are considered to be extraordinary. And I do think that to get past some of those set points, um, that it is extraordinary. But I, one of the points that I want to make that this is possible for anyone. So when you're dreaming big and you're getting past that first that first mindset hack that I talked about, and it's about you know being safe, being small, coloring inside the lines, and doing everything that everyone expects of you, which is complete bullshit. It's more about what brings you joy, what makes you happy, where do you want to move towards, what do you want out of your life, and just going for it. And then kind of like ignoring the set points that were put before you. And in the next mindset hack, I'm going to talk about how, like, a process that you can go through to get there. All right, let me just. Oh, okay. All right, yeah, this is the perfect example. I shared this in my blog. A set point that society tries to set for me all the time. So I'm a runner, and I'm in my 50s, and I've been running for a long time. I've been running since I was in my 30s, and I enjoy it. I love it. I run races. It's fabulous. And it's not just about me staying fit, losing weight, or any of those kind of things. Although when I first started running, I did do it to lose weight, and yes, it did work because I was in my early 40s. Um, but it's also like a mental thing for me. It like releases energy that I need to get out of my body. It de-stresses me a little bit. It really like resets my day, and it helps me in that way too. So it's a mental thing. It's not just a physical thing. But one of the things that many people will say to me is, "Oh, enjoy it while you can because you're going to ruin your knees. You're going to have to get knee replacements at some point, and blah 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 blah." And then another thing was, oh, you better enjoy it because you're not going to be able to do that for long. And I know a lot of these things are bullshit because I'm in the running community, and I know many people that are older than me that can like hand me my ass during a race. They're a lot faster, quicker. They're not in pain. And my personal favorite what came from an orthopedic surgeon who, man, if I wasn't on crutches at the time, I probably would have, never mind. But anyway, he said to me, why bother? Why is this like, why bother running anymore? Why is this important to you? It's not like you're going to win a medal or anything. And these are all like set points or limitations that people are, um, that they set to themselves, that they believe themselves, that they're pushing onto me, um, because they probably mean well. They probably don't, they're not trying to hurt me or hold me back, or maybe they would like to be running but they can't for some reason, or they think they can't, or whatever. I don't know what the whole reasoning is behind this, but these are all of these things are coming from people that have zero experience with what I'm doing. They also know zero about me. They don't know what other workouts I do, how I take care of myself, what I do to avoid hurting my knees, what I do to keep myself healthy. They know nothing about me. They're just offering all this free, unsolicited advice that is a bunch of bullshit. And we have to learn how to like tune those things out and just move forward. I would say to myself, and a story, and I'll tell you a story that comes from the next mindset hack. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to go into that. Let me see. Yeah. Okay, so the questions that I wanted to leave you with. What standards are you using as a guide? How much are you limiting yourself because you don't want to fail big? Okay? What are, what are how are you setting yourself back? What are you comparing yourself to? Comparing is like the worst thing you could possibly do. It's the killer of all dreams and the killer of all fun. So, like, comparing is something you should avoid doing. Ask yourself, how can I expand on this? How can I expand my limits? How can I move up this little guidepost? How can I move myself past this? There was this camp that my daughter did once. It was called the Open Jar Camp. It was musical theater camp, and the open jar theory is about. It was like some kind of a study that was done, and they put a bunch of fleas in a jar, and they covered the jar so that when they tried to get out and they tried to get out, they just kept hitting the top, the ceiling of the jar, and it limited them, right? That limited them until they got to the point where they didn't believe anymore that they could get past that. And then they took the cover off the jar and they never left the jar because they had the belief system that they couldn't jump out of the jar. That's the perfect example of this mindset hack. Like all those limitations that you see things on TV, on social media, you see all these, you're told all these things as a child, you see how your parents lived, your friends, your family, your peers, everything, and you use these as a guide. I mean, this is normal. You use these as a guide to set those limitations on yourself when you don't even realize that you're doing this. It's not something you might be doing on purpose. And so ask yourself those questions. How much are you limiting yourself because that's how you see, that's your ceiling. You haven't seen anyone else get past that ceiling. And how can you expand this to make it more amazing and bigger where it seems dangerous, where it seems like crazy, right? And I'm gonna tell you a story that I talked about in my What Are Your Limitations blog post, where what are your real limitations? And your real limitations are actually, there are no limitations. The only real limitations are the one that you believe. So if you have decided to believe that you have some kind of a limitation, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm not educated enough, I'm not the right nationality, I live in the wrong country. Um, you might have tons and tons and tons of limitations, and some people have more set on them by society than others. Some people have a harder time than others just because of these limitations. Well, I want to tell you the story that really taught me this lesson in a big way. It was super powerful, and I feel like I'm really lucky that I was able to learn this lesson. So when I was 39, I had a stroke that was caused by stress. And the reason I know it was caused by stress was, first of all, it was an artery in my neck, and the inside lining of the artery tore, okay? And it was from being under enormous amounts of stress for a couple of years. And when I say enormous, I'm talking enormous. Like my hair was falling out. It was a very horrible situation that I was in, and I'm not really going to go into it, but it took me a couple of years to get out of it. And then, like, once I was out of it, that's when I had the stroke, which is kind of like really funny. But I was in the best shape of my life. I ate pretty well. Um, and the doctors, when they did the angio and they went in, they said my arteries were very, very healthy. It had nothing to do with the health of my arteries. I had no plaque, nothing. It was just a tear. They kept asking me questions about a past injury that I probably had, a car accident, and there was none. It was just this extreme stress. And so what happened was, when you have any type of an injury, the blood clots up. So the blood clotted up in that area because there was a tear. And then once it clotted up to the point where it just blocked the artery, and that's when I had the stroke. And it stayed blocked. So you have two vertebral arteries that go into your brain, and that's why I'm not dead right now. So the other one took over. So it was like a partial stroke. It wasn't even a very, I mean, it was serious. I had blood clots that went into my brain, but it wasn't like, it wasn't going to cause a lot of damage. It was a very small amount of damage. And so that artery was completely blocked, and it was, a couple of neurologists looked at me and they decided that it was too dangerous to fix and clear out, and they were just going to let it heal closed. So they sent me home, and I had balance issues. That was the only thing that I had that affected me. So I had trouble keeping my balance when I was walking around and stuff, but it wasn't too bad. I could walk. I walked freely without like a cane or a walker or anything like that. It was a little bit challenging sometimes. I had to concentrate a lot, but I was still pretty well off. I was okay. But it was terrifying because I had to sit still for 8 weeks, which is the amount of time they say it takes an artery to heal. And they wanted me to sit still. Don't stress. Like, don't stress over anything. Don't do anything. Don't drink. That really bothered me because I was so bored. Do not exert yourself too much. Do sleep on your back. I had a brace that I had to wear. That got old really fast. I just got rid of that. But I was supposed to wear a brace and like sleep on my back for 8 weeks. My mom came and lived with me to take care of my kids. I had 3 kids at the time. 2 of them were pretty young, so it was extremely stressful to be in the house and not be able to parent your kids and to watch your mother work her butt off trying to do it when you just were like just laying there. It was very unnatural, and so it was very stressful, which I wasn't supposed to be experiencing, right? So anyway, I went through this 8 week period, and they told me things like I might never regain my balance again completely because they felt like the artery might open and close, and so I would get like these rushes. And I might always be this way. And they called me, one of them called me, I'll never forget it. He called me a delicate flower. And he told me I shouldn't be doing things like running, or at the time when this happened, I was remodeling my house. You shouldn't be ripping carpets out of your house or painting ceilings or doing any of that kind of work because you're a delicate flower, which is like, if anyone knows me, it's like complete bullshit. So um, I was terrified, just to say the least. And I definitely sat in that for a while, and I thought, what am I going to do? How am I going to support myself? How am I going to take care of my kids? I'm going to get fat because I can't work out anymore. That was definitely a concern. Very shallow one, but it was there. And my biggest fear was that my kids were going to have to take care of me as I got older. And I was just like, and I wasn't even, I was 40. I was 40, and my kids were young. So it was just depressing and horrible. So I decided at that point, I was not cleared by any doctors to do anything. They just were like, come to your checkups and, make sure everything's all right. So I think it was like weekly at first, and then it was monthly, and blah blah blah. But I decided that I was going to do some research and find out if anybody ever had like a positive outcome from this. And so I started doing it, and it was super depressing. I found nothing positive. It was horrible. The stories I read were horrible. And I was like, this is not working. And I was just about to give up. And I was at my neurologist's office, and I was reading one of the magazines out of sheer boredom. It was a neurology magazine. And there was a story in there about an NFL football player who had the same thing, a dissection of his artery, but it was the one that went to his heart. And he had the same thing that happened to me, but with his heart. And he healed, and then he went back to play for the NFL. And that was it. I like closed the magazine. I didn't even finish reading the article because I was like, that is the most positive thing I heard. The NFL is like, that's a rough sport, and I felt like this delicate. I felt like at any moment, I felt like a time bomb. I could just die. Like this clot could like come out of my artery and go into my brain and kill me. And I felt I was terrified. It was a horrible feeling. And when I read this, I was like, okay, if he can go and play football professionally, I can certainly run down the street, right? That's what I was thinking. I was like, these doctors are just afraid to tell me to do these things because they're afraid they're going to be held liable. And one of the reasons I had such a hard time finding positive stories is because it's kind of rare what happened to me. And so that's mentally what I told myself, whether it's right or wrong, true or false. Like we're talking about these perceived limitations that we have, perceived, right? These are perceived. These doctors don't know anything. It's not something that happens very often. And do they even care to study it and look into these people? No, they don't. They're busy. They have better things to do. They have sick people to take care of. They're not going to look back at all these people. Some doctors do studies like this, but you know, they're gonna stay on the safe side of things so that I don't, you know, like ticking time bomb, explode. So I decided that I was going to start running again. So I started really slow because, like I said, I didn't have good balance. So I would go down the street and I would like pick like a landmark, like at that stop sign, I'm going to run until I get to that stop sign. And then at that stop sign, I'll walk. And then when I got there, I just did one little thing at a time. And when I got there, I was like, all right, I'm going to walk until I get to the end of that driveway. And I would do that one little step at a time. And it was hard at first because in order to remain balanced, I had to concentrate. I had to look at the ground the whole time. I had to really concentrate. So it wasn't just physically draining for me, it was mentally draining. And so I had my stroke in May, and I ran my first 5K in December with my oldest daughter and a bunch of friends that were supporting me. And since then, I've run like over 15 half marathons, many 10Ks, 6 Ragnars, which is a 200-mile relay race that you do on a team um, in the Adirondacks, which is so much fun. Um, many 5Ks. I ran a full marathon and I did a sprint triathlon. So I kind of proved them wrong. But the best part of the story is when a couple of years after I started running again, and I was really doing very well. I was running in my neighborhood, and I was feeling great. It was just one of those days where the temperature was perfect, and I felt good, and I was coming around the corner, and as I came around the corner, I got really dizzy, exactly how I felt when I had my stroke, and I almost fell. Like, you know how when you're running and you trip and you're like trying to catch up with your feet? It was like that. And I didn't actually fall, so that was good. And I ended up calling a friend and staying on the phone with them until I got home because I was pretty close to my house. And then I called the neurologist, and of course, I had to go into the emergency room, and they were going to do an angio to see what was going on. So I'm in the room still. I never had a doctor do this, but he kind of like brought me out of sedation on the table, and he was like, "Tina, you're not going to believe this." Um, and I was like, what? And he was like, your artery is opened and it's healed and it's working. There's blood flowing through it. And that was it. And then when I talked to him later, after, you go in and have the discussion after to see what they found or whatever. I asked him, I'm like, so what are the chances of this? There were two questions I asked. I only talk about the positive one in the blog. I asked, what are the chances of this happening? How many times have you seen this happening, this healing of the artery? And he said, never. Because first of all, it's not a very common thing to happen in the first place. And then second of all, he's never seen that happen. And the second question I asked, I said, what are the chances of this happening again? And he had no answer for that either. So I decided that, um, you know, my decision was that I made myself stronger by exercising and running, and then it probably wasn't going to happen again, but I wouldn't. I felt like I got a second chance. I definitely did. I could have died. I had clots go into my brain and nothing happened just because of where they went. It didn't cause any damage. I survived. I healed. I just feel like, I'm meant to be here. Anybody who's gone through something like that, I feel like they know they're like meant to be here for a reason. And I feel like my reason is to teach you what I've learned from these experiences that I've had and to share what worked for me. And so what this taught me was that anything is possible. What you believe, your limitations are what you believe them to be. And if you believe you're limited, then you will be, right? And if you believe that you're not limited, and um, and you're 100% behind that, and you're aligned with that, and you're willing to work towards that. It wasn't like it just happened. It wasn't like I just sat on my ass and I got healed. I don't know if I would have healed. Who knows? Maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't have. But I worked towards what I wanted. And I was like 100% in. Like I thought I could possibly die if I start running again. This clot could come out and I could die. I'm raising my blood pressure, you know what I mean? Like I was like, I could die, but I was like, where do I want to be? Do I want to be alive and really limited and sickly? Or do I want to, you know, live? Like I wanted to live and I wanted to be active and I wanted to be myself. So I was like, if I die, I die. That was the attitude I had. A little bit selfish, but I wanted to set an example for my kids. Like, this is how you do it. This is how you do it. And so that was my lessons in limitations. There are no limitations. And I can't remember who says this quote. I know it's someone big, but like, if you believe, I'm gonna fuck this up. If you believe you can, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. I think that's it. I think that was something like that. And it might have been Roosevelt, it wasn't Eleanor, but um, yeah, I'm not sure who that quote is. You guys can let me know. I'm fucking up all the quotes today, but I believe that 100%. Like if you believe you can do it, then you can. If you believe you can't, then you're right. Because the only person who sets those limitations on yourself are you. All right. So like the first mindset hack that I went through, I've been on here for a little while. I don't want to go much longer. Is being reasonable versus being dreaming big, and I would say be unreasonable. Okay, that's the first thing you need to do is just be unreasonable. Practice this because we are just like almost trained to like think small, be safe. So practice this in a journal, write out your dreams, and then look at what you wrote, and then practice making it bigger and expanding it. Teach yourself to think this way, and the only way you're going to do that is by doing it, right? So, like being purposeful and intentional about doing it. And then the second one is what are the guide points? What are your set points around you? Like, look at your limits. So, look at your dream and say, am I looking at what my parents did or what my peers do or what society expects of me when I'm setting these limitations on myself? And then how do I get past these limitations? How do I get past these beliefs? How can I build on that? So like if you're I used an example in the blog post. Like if you're just retired, so you're in your 60s, right? But you're not done yet. You have a lot of energy and you love working, but you want to do what you want to do. So you're like, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to start like a consultation business. And then you have like these voices in your head, and I talk about this a little bit in the limitations one blog post. Um, and I'm going to post the links to the blog post below this because I talked about them so much so that you could read them. There's 3 of them, and I'll put the links below. So I talk about this, like as soon as you set this goal, you start to, like, those limitations start popping up in your head. And I call this voice in your head, some people call it your ego. I call it like Debbie Downer, or what did I say? Party Pooper Pete. Like I have like all these names for that voice in your head that talks you out of things. And so like some of the things you might hear is you're too old, who you're kidding, you don't have the energy to start a new business, or what about how much it's going to cost? You never ran a business before because you worked in corporate. So like how are you going to run a business? You don't know what you're doing. Like these are the limitations that you're setting on yourself. Then you're going to grab those limitations and you're going to prove them wrong, just like I did. I looked at that limitation that was being set on me from the neurologist and from all the research I did, and I decided I was going to find something to prove it wrong, and I did. I found something. I found something that supported me. It wasn't exact, it wasn't perfect. I didn't even finish reading it, but I decided that that was going to work from that. And that's what you need to do. You need to take those limitations that come up, that voice of Debbie Downer talking to you in your head. And I'm sorry if your name is Debbie. I don't mean anything bad by that. You can call it whatever you want, your ego, and you're going to take those limitations and you're going to destroy them. You're going to get rid of them. And this is this is what you have to do continuously. This isn't something that never pops up. I can guarantee you that the most famous person in the world, someone you maybe view as super successful, still has these limitations pop up, and they still have to handle these things. It's something that never stops. You know what they say, new level, new devil, right? So it doesn't matter what level you're at. You could be just starting, or you can be Oprah. You know, there's still going to be limitations that pop up. There's still going to be things where you feel like you're limited and you have to get past those things. But so it's about doing these exercises, these journaling exercises, or however you want to do them. Journaling, I think, is the best way to do it. I do these every single freaking day, every day, because you're not going to get past those things just by ignoring them or just thinking about it a little bit. You have to like kind of train your brain to think bigger, to be bigger, to like wash away those limitations. So I hope that was helpful. Like I said, I'll post the blog posts below so you could read them if you'd like. And I'm also going to be doing a podcast on this tomorrow. It'll be released on Friday morning. So I'll put a link to the podcast, but it won't be released, like I said, until Friday. But you could look at like the past Get Unstuck series podcast. I would love for you to listen. Okay, I'll see you next week. Bye.